All right, what's going on, everybody? My name's Jordan. I'm the head coach here at SaberSim, joined by Eric, one of our data scientists on our team, to talk about a big update we made to our NBA Showdown ownership and the field lineups used in contest sims ahead of game one of the NBA Finals here tonight. Really exciting improvement that we think is going to dramatically improve the quality of the lineups that you're getting recommended to play by the contest sims. I wanted to have Eric come on and talk a little bit about all his hard work on this project here. So, Eric, I'll kick it over to you, and we can just kick it off maybe to start here, talking about what some of the issues you saw in the old way we used to do our field lineups and our ownership were for NBA Showdown.
Yeah, so sort of the first thing that we noticed, just even just using the app, playing some NBA showdowns, the first thing that you sort of notice is just the duplicate counts that we're generating with the old way that we were doing our field lineups, um, and the big, I guess, elephant in the room is like the the dupe numbers there uh, are just like significantly underrepresenting the top duped
Hmm.
lineups that we actually see in whatever contest that you're playing. Um, and so we basically built out a big sort of backtesting framework for a lot of these contests, and obviously it showed us that bias. Another thing that it showed us was just the distribution of salary within our field lineups
Yeah.
was a little bit off, where we had basically too many low salary field lineups compared to when we saw the actual lineups. There were a lot more, within 1,000 of max salary or stuff like that. So I think if you sort of had played NBA Showdown, uh, you probably were sort of conscious of that. And
Yeah.
even in some of the content that you and Andrew have done, um, we've always sort of recommended some sort of manual dupe adjustment,
Hmm.
just because we know that that wasn't the strongest piece uh, of the old model here. So um, yeah, that's kind of, I guess, the background on the old stuff and why we wanted to take a swing at trying to improve it.
Yeah, but before we talk about the new stuff here, which I'm really excited about, what was the impact of that in someone's build? Like if they ran a contest sim on the old field lineups, what types of lineups were they more likely to get that were maybe actually had a lower ROI than we were calculating because of the biases in the field?
Yeah, so what it tended to do was the most duped lineups were shown as more positive ROI pre-lock compared to post-lock. So
Hmm.
obviously these lineups like that you're showing are like good lineups, right? If you think even just like projection wise, like they're going to be good lineups.
Yeah.
But because when we do the contest sim, like we only have that lineup in the field 21 times, because it's a good lineup, like it can make up that difference. Um, but if the dupe number is like significantly under what it should be, when we get to the post lock of, oh, all of a sudden this lineup's duped 90 times, it can pretty quickly turn it to a negative ROI lineup. Um, and so I think like that's really what was happening, where these lineups that were showing, less dupes pre-lock, they were coming in as more duped, which obviously has a big impact on the ROI itself.
Yeah. And something I noticed too is that these lineups where we were projecting would be duped once or zero times or two times, like really low dupes, those were really sensitive to being duped even just a handful more times in the post contest sim. It was very easy to see a lineup with, a 600% projected ROI before lock saying zero dupes. That ROI could crater post lock if it ended up being duped five, six, seven, 8 times.
Right.
And sometimes these lineups, had pretty high salary. They projected pretty well, lineups that you would certainly expect people would play, that the sim was kind of just missing there because of that dupe calculation.
Right, and I think too, like, another thing, even with that lineup, it's like the cash rate is 52%.
Hmm.
Um, like, to get a 0 dupe lineup where that's the cash rate is just, kind of I mean, it's basically it's not possible, but, even the other piece of it with the the weaker field lineups in the field that we were creating, like, before this, uh, it also was pushing these ROIs super high,
Yeah.
especially when it was, like, a 0 dupe lineup like this that, probably is gonna be duped, so, um, yeah.
Yeah, so let's get to the fun stuff here of what's new and what's improved. So, what has changed here? In particular, what will people see that's a little bit different using this for the first time? How have we improved this here for the NBA Finals?
Yeah, so, kind of taking it back to that backtesting framework, essentially, we went through, looked at how ownerships and how lineups actually shook out in a lot of these showdown contests,
Yeah,
and basically tried to match as well as we could what the actual lineups that were going to be in the contest. Um, what it resulted in was just a significantly sort of closer to reality pre-lock field lineups, in terms of what people are actually going to play, the like salary ranges that
hmm,
people kind of like to hover in, um, which gets us to just an overall better prediction of the number of duplicates that a lineup's going to have.
yeah, and I mean, right off the bat, one thing that jumps out to me: our top dupe lineup in a build here for tonight, 103 dupes, much higher than the 21 dupes. And I've seen builds, just playing this season where sometimes our most dupe lineup was a lot lower than that with the old model. 103 just like looks and feels intuitively a lot more accurate for what some of the most duplicated lineups are likely to be here.
Yeah, and I mean, I also just want to point out there, like the top duped lineups here are showing as negative ROI. I think
Yeah, that's a
that
big point.
that passes the sniff test like a lot better than um, before, where these lineups, like the most duped lineup is probably not going to be a positive ROI lineup.
Yeah,
Um, and now we're showing that okay, this the lineups get to overduped versus before it was like pre-lock we basically never showed that a lineup was going to be overduped like this. So yeah, I'm really happy with how that turned out and how that looks.
yeah, that's a huge point because you could almost before talk yourself into playing highly duped lineups, maybe even instead of the lineups we expected to not be duped, because they'd be a little bit less fragile to us being slightly wrong on this
Yeah,
number. But in practice, we were actually probably really wrong on this number, and you were playing a suboptimal lineup there. So on the flip side, the top ROI lineups that are coming out now here with these new field lineups, one, we're more confident in that dupe number, but you're also seeing more realistic metrics in the rest of the way that the lineup sims out. This is a lineup that's caching 17% of the time.
right.
It makes a little more sense why that lineup's less likely to be duplicated, probably sacrificing quite a bit on projected score, actually, it looks like at first glance here.
Yeah, I definitely think the uh, just the whole sort of suite of metrics just looks a lot closer to reality and what we sort of can expect. Another thing that I sort of liked to look at was in with the new model sorting by dupes and just looking at like the top 50 lineups.
Hmm.
If you go to compact, it's pretty cool that way. Um, so if you sort this by dupes and basically look at like what the ROI like looks like, um, you might just have to add it as a column.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, there you go. It's pretty striking in terms of like sorting by that, looking at the ROIs. You see just like there's just a slew of negative ROI lineups that we're now saying like too many people are going to play this lineup,
Yeah.
compared to before, where if you do the same thing, you get like positive ROI, positive ROI, positive ROI. So I think it's a big step up in terms of basically identifying like the sort of like chalk donkey super duped, like
Yeah.
sharing with 150 people, that type of lineup. It just does a lot better at identifying those. So
What are the types of lineups people should expect to see a little bit more with this approach? Because I do think there is a pretty big difference in the lineups that you'll be playing if you're just following even just what I've recommended in my videos to do with contest sims with the different fields.
yeah, so I mean, you're definitely gonna get more, I'll say like fragile lineups, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, it's going to be caring more about the low dupe lineups. It's going to be like a little bit more contrarian. You might be giving up like a little bit more salary in some of those lineups to avoid
Hmm.
that duplication. So it's stuff like that. I still think there's spots where you can change this, like to what you were talking about before, in terms of the like fragility of some of these.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, if that lineup is duped twice, like maybe the ROI drops by 2 times. Like,
Yeah.
there's still like a little bit of, I mean, there's still uncertainty in this like dupe number that we're showing.
Hmm.
Uh, so I think taking that into account is like still important, but overall, I think your portfolio of lineups now will be, uh, the average dupe number that comes in flashback after is just going to be a lot lower, if you're running, your default contest sim build now versus last week, uh, in the conference final slates.
Yeah. And one of the things too that I think is just really valuable about these kinds of updates is when we get a greater confidence for this dupe measurement and we believe that this is more accurate, it does improve the quality of lineups that you're playing if you're just full on trust the sims, run the contest sim, play the top 50, 150, whatever. If you're somebody that spends a lot of time dialing in, fine tuning, you have kind of a developed process, it also helps that person because if you're banking on this dupe number as a part of your process, or if you're looking at the standard deviations or the cache rates or something like that, or playing around with those numbers to come up with your own custom metric or filter lineups or anything like that, as these numbers get more accurate, it helps everybody kind of regardless of what your process looks like there. And that's something that I'm pretty excited about because I like to fiddle around with these things and come up with custom metrics and try to find a way to get some extra incremental value with this stuff. And knowing that these numbers are a little more accurate, it feels like it just gives me more runway to do that.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, even so obviously, like the ownership projections are a result of the field
Yeah.
lineups, right? Like, and so because we improved the field lineups, like we improved ownership, that was one of the pieces in the
Hmm.
back testing where it was looking at, just like the, captain Jalen Brown at 5.7% there, comparing that to what he actually came in at, like in the contest. So we improved that aspect too. So for stuff like Saber score, if you want to get crazy with some metrics or whatever, like even just that ownership number is going to
Hmm.
be closer to reality, which, I think is also just a good thing for everyone there.
Yeah, it improves saber score even in that case, because that if that ownership number is a little bit closer, the adjusted ownership and the saber score metrics are going to be a little more accurate there as well. So, um, what are some limitations here that we should still be aware of? Whether it's things that are like explicit biases, just things that we're still a little bit off on or have a tendency to over or underrate that we want to take a look at in the future here, or kind of more unknown unknowns, like just the noise of a dupe measurement, the variance of what this number actually ends up being. Like, what are just some things people should be aware of as they're running contest sims on their build for the finals?
I definitely think, obviously, more like generally applicable is just the noise of
Yeah.
the dupe prediction, kind of to what we talked about before in terms of like the fragility of how many times a lineup is duped. I think you could do something pretty interesting now with like cash rate and the dupe number, because those seem to go together like pretty well. Uh, that would be kind of interesting. I think the other thing is like this is more specifically for today and is sort of like a slate by slate thing, but like Porzingis today is really interesting to me where his ownership will come into just coming off an injury and stuff like that. I think um, there's a little bit less uncertainty in him as a player,
Yeah.
and so how much that sort of reflects itself in the ownership and in how many people are clicking his name, obviously would impact the dupe number of like when he's in a lineup, how often that lineup is duped. Um, so I think that's just another aspect where if there's sort of like no ball, or it could even just be like people like playing Luka Doncic, and so he's going to be over his ownership, or like there's still stuff like that that I think you can pick up on and um, sort of implement into that final lineup selection stage.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a really good point. This even is a really big benefit to the ball knowers, right? Like if you're going through, you're kind of trusting the sims, setting up some guardrails, playing the top ROI lineups, but then manipulating min and max exposures to apply your basketball takes. It's going to do a better job now of identifying the most profitable way to do that. Like if if you're picking up on Porzingis, that's a guy you want to be over on because you think um, the projections are underrating his usage tonight, for example. Now, when you do that, you're getting stronger Porzingis lineups, or vice versa, right? Like Al Horford was jumping a little bit out to me earlier as like maybe he's going to play a little bit more here if Porzingis isn't totally ready. You're going to get better Al Horford lineups if you're doing that. So it really just kind of improves that quality there overall. I do think that point about the noise of that dupes number is just a really good point to hammer home, and something we talked about in our most recent pro video as well, of to just be aware that there's still variance in this number, and that's always going to affect the way that lineups ultimately sim out. Very similar to how there's variance in a player's projection, and it's not a exact science there or a perfect prediction there. There's some variance in this number as well. I think that's just a good thing to be aware of as people are building their lineups.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just I don't want to get too far into it, but
Yeah.
like looking at the win rate compared to the cash rate compared to the dupes of that lineup, like the ROI from that lineup is like winning solo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if that lineup gets duped twice, all of a sudden, you know, in the 0.1% sims that it wins, like you're winning half as much money. So yeah, I think that's just a really it's important to think about in terms of like how that lineup is achieving its ROI, and specifically now because we can have more confidence in the dupes. Obviously, it's not perfect confidence or anything like we've emphasized, um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
One more metric I just want to call out specifically because I just noticed it here is that the standard deviation of ROI. They are much bigger, and that is a lot more in line with, I think, how you would intuitively think about Showdown. Like you mentioned, this
right.
lineup's ROI is coming from it winning uniquely, and that is just as your top ROI lineup in your pool. That this just checks out a lot more intuitively here with what you
Yeah,
would expect there. You see, when we flip back to the Pacers Celtics one using the old field, right? This lineup has a really high cash rate. Its ROI standard deviation is a lot lower. Like we're implying that this lineup is kind of getting to have its cake and eat it too, with a 58% cash rate, one
Yeah.
dupe, and a good chance to win. Like it can't really be all of those things. You have to kind of
Yeah.
pick your spots there. So just a lot more accurate there.
Yeah. No, that's a great point.
Cool. Well, we've obviously need to jump off and build some lineups ourselves here. Final note: are there other sports that we're planning on rolling out this improvement to? I think other dupe sports in particular, I could see this being really valuable.
Yeah, so the goal is MMA for I'm pretty sure there's a card on Saturday.
Cool.
If not Saturday, definitely the next event, and then won't be this weekend, but uh, NASCAR as well. We'll get the new Duke model, and then I mean, just to emphasize another thing, like on beta here, this is the instant lineups update as well, where builds are just taking a lot less time, which is also pretty cool. So I just wanted to shout that out too.
Yeah, yeah. Throwing that in at the last second there. Yeah, on beta, if you are a SaberSim Pro or Ultimate subscriber, you get access to beta test new features on our beta.sabersim.com URL. We pushed out a big update as well this morning. This is still in beta as well, so be aware, possible to run into bugs there, but the time it takes to build lineups in NBA Showdown is like a fraction of what it was. It takes just a few seconds to build 5,000 lineups there. So these two features coming out at the same time is like Christmas for NBA Showdown players ahead of the finals here. So super exciting.
Yeah,
Cool.
I'm excited to get some lineups in. Should be fun.
Awesome. Well, Eric, thanks for coming on and walking me through all of this. For the folks watching, if you haven't already checked it out, we have a free 5-day trial on our site, sabersim.com. And check it out for 5 days. Get a couple NBA Finals games under your belt here with the new field lineup, some of these new features. For everyone else, hope you enjoy this. Hope you get some high ROI, low duped lineups in your entries file here for tonight and the rest of the finals. And we'll see you next time.